Hi, this is Geoff Berry, and welcome to the Nature Calling channel, where we aim to deepen connection to the earth and to the spirit of life and to all our kin on this beautiful planet.
Oh, thank you so much for joining me, Jessica. You want to
Good to
let
be here,
everyone know
Geoff.
where you're joining us from and who you are?
Yes, I'm Jessica Canham, and I'm on the small Eastern Caribbean island of Dominica, English-speaking island. We often get confused with the Dominican Republic, and we are not the DR. We're Dominica between Martinique and Guadeloupe, and I'm at 1,500 feet in the mountains
Right.
on a rainforest, the edge of a rainforest, which is actually a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
Uh-huh.
So it's a very unique ecosystem, and we're
Wow.
one of the last oceanic rainforests in the Caribbean and in the world.
Wow. Well, you've already answered one of my questions, which is it Caribbean or Caribbean? So thank you for that. And another one, like people in Australia, at least where I'm from, are not going to know when you say between which islands. Are you closer to South America or the United States? Give us a big picture.
Almost in between. I should mention also that the name of our island is Waitikubuli, which is the Kalinago name, interchangeable with Dominica, which means tall is her body. And we
Wow.
are about 3.5 hours by air to Miami and about 4 hours to Colombia. So
Huh.
to Cartagena to the north coast of Colombia. So we're closer to the US.
Mm.
But our
Mm.
influences are there's more Spanish speakers in the Caribbean than in English speakers, so we have a lot of ties with the French, with the Spanish, and with the French Caribbean as well.
Okay. And you mentioned what sounded like some indigenous names and language. Is there much of that culture still alive?
Yes, we are one of the last islands with an indigenous community where the indigenous people weren't completely exterminated here.
Oh.
They survived the Kalinago. They fought over 200 years, the colonizers. And there is Kalinago territory on the northeast coast, where there are about 2,000 Kalinago people who have the rights to self-determination, and they have a representative, and they hold the land in common. So we're so unique in many ways, and that's
Mm.
certainly one of them. Is
Mm.
still
Oh,
having
that's
our.
wonderful. Wonderful to hear. So in Australia, it's customary to start meetings by acknowledging the country with a capital C that we're on, as in the specific tribal country of the original Australians, Aboriginal Australians. So I'm on Yuin country, as it's known here, in particular the Walbunja tribal lands. And we still have we have a local culture, we have an Aboriginal culture that's still strong. We pay respect to the elders of the past, of the present, and the emerging ones as they continue to keep their culture alive. So we're really lucky in that sense, South Coast New South Wales and in Australia, the indigenous populations always struggle under the weight of oppression, but they still have, yeah, they have a culture that they keep on building, and we're lucky enough to learn from. And speaking of learning from, that's, the reason I asked you along was to learn about the way that your community coped with a really big hurricane. And as I was saying, we were just speaking offline. You get the hurricanes, we get the fires and floods down here in Australia. I'm where I live was in the end only a few hundred meters from the front of the mega fire of New Year's 2020. So we were enormously lucky with a southerly change. So I've had the immediacy of it right on my doorstep, and lots of friends have been washed out by floods up north. And in general, so just to set the scene, thanks for letting us know a little bit more about Dominica. We originally connected a few years ago in the leadership through collapse course by Jem Bendell. And yeah, and we've been meeting pretty regularly ever since to chat about how we're going to deal with, well, ecosystem collapse and societal breakdown as it continues
Continues and accelerates.
and
Yeah.
accelerates. Yeah, we're on a real spike, obviously. So that's, that really requires a bit of a trauma-informed approach, in my opinion. I've probably been a bit too blunt about this sort of stuff in the past, and I've really seen people kind of jolt and withdraw and realized I'm not helping them to enter the conversation when I go straight to, hey, we're in the sixth mass extinction and we're going to be part of that if, things don't change soon. Things aren't changing. So let's get ready for hard times. And I think that's a good way to go forwards, to speak openly. But I guess I've kind of tried to make my approach a bit more user friendly, we might say. But the thing that sparked up in the conversation we had, where I said, I've got to talk to Jessica, people have to hear this, was when you talked about, because in our group we all have our little presentations, different aspects of how we might be able to help people through collapse. When you spoke about the way your community came together after a really significant hurricane, my ears really pricked up, because I thought, this is one of the few good stories we have to tell. How will people come together and work together when so much of what we see in the media as it wakes up is your Mad Max post-apocalyptic scenario of fighting it out. And I thought, wow, I want to know more about this. So please do tell. I mean, feel free to go back to the start, because of course people won't know about the story, and I'd love to hear it and to have you share it.
Sure. Well, thanks for that, Geoff. I've told it many times, but every time it's still significant, because I
Mm.
actually learn new things and see new things in the
Hmm.
telling of it.
Oh,
And this
great.
one thing came up as I was preparing for this. So
Thanks.
let's get into it. I'm going to share my screen
Hmm.
because I like visuals. I'm a visual person
Hmm.
and I love having the opportunity to um, give people a sense of where I'm at. So this
Mm.
is the overview of my village, and as
Wow.
you see, we're nestled in the mountains, and it's all mountains and valleys. This island, and that's why we still have forests left, because they serve as a real protector for we couldn't be deforested because of the steepness in the
That's
valleys.
it. Yeah.
And this is where I am based, Cappy Cottage. We run a little retreat center. And I really think of it as kind of like a sanctuary where people can
Mm.
come and be in nature and really connect with each other and with nature. So we run a lot of different programs for young people and adults as well. So here it is.
Well, that's a
This was
different picture.
yeah, this was September 18th, 2017. This, what you're looking at, is an aerial view of Hurricane Maria. And Dominica, we are in the center. That blue dot is the eye of the storm,
Wow.
and the eye was over us for 12 hours plus. So this category 5 hurricane was one of the fastest forming storms and one of the most powerful in the Atlantic ever to this point.
Whoa.
So
What
there have
year
been
was
more.
this, Jessica?
2017, so
Mm.
coming up to 8 years anniversary in September.
Mm.
And it grew from a category 1, which is under 100 miles an hour, to category 5 in just 24 hours. So we're at 285 mile an hour winds, or 185 mile an hour winds, 260 kilometers or something. Just, it's catastrophic.
Yeah, that's almost inconceivable.
Yeah, it's inconceivable. And especially if you see how, it's hundreds of miles wide. You see our little island, we're only 45 kilometers long.
Yeah.
Um, and it was moving through, and just everything in its wake was just shredded. And I'll show you the scenes we woke up to.
Wow.
So every leaf on every tree gone. You know, homes, buildings, infrastructure mostly gone, 90% damaged and gone.
Right.
Agriculture gone. This is the capital city. So what you had is these are trees from the rainforest in the capital, because you had
Mm.
the rivers that came down took the trees from hundreds of miles and pushed them all into the city. So burying cars and buildings and animals and yeah, just unbelievable devastation. It was like if a nuclear bomb had gone off.
Mm.
And this was my village. And the next day, interestingly enough, I mean, the trauma of that, but the next day, people were outside checking on their neighbors. This is my neighbor Ronald. He's helping put a roof back on. We build with tin and galvanized and wood and stone. And there he is, hammering away, making sure the roof is back on his neighbor's
Wow.
house. Um, there's T. John and his son working away, and you see in the back, it almost looks like a
Yeah.
wildfire had gone
Yeah,
through.
that's really strange because that looks quite similar in a sense from a distance as to what it looks like after a fire has really torn through a place.
Yeah, and that's because everything dies and is just
Mm,
becomes brown and
mm,
charred looking. But people immediately, we have this, most people are backyard farmers and gardeners. So everybody started planting. As soon as things were cleaned up, people went back to the garden. This is a
mm.
typical plot in the backyard. Um, we had 65 deaths, I think it was, in count, and more people died after the storm.
Yeah.
But it's a case where there was no electricity for 10 months. The grid was down for 10 months.
Whoa,
So
that is a very long time.
very long time. So people went back to doing things by hand, went back to kerosene lamps. We went back to
Uh-huh.
people generators to keep their fridges going for a couple hours a day. So we lived very, very differently
Wow,
after.
can we pause on that for a moment? Because what we found, particularly after the floods up north a couple of years ago, was people were saying, "Oh, like we're out of power for like it's been a week now." And I mean that's real. It's tough when your entire life is, you're used to having your fridges and your microwaves and so on and so forth. And all of a sudden, like, everyone that comes out of a natural disaster, house is gone, neighbors might have perished. There's a lot of real trauma in that. But 10 months without the grid, that's actually a lifestyle change. You have to go back to finding a way to get by properly for
Yeah,
like for nearly a year.
yeah, yeah. Not to mention schools are closed, not to mention so much damage other to infrastructure. Some areas were completely cut off, so people would be on foot. Very difficult to
Wow.
to um, to cope.
And can I just
Uh,
ask you about this? Would most people have a pretty decent sized garden in general in Dominica? Like that's a big garden. That's, that's really feeding a family type
Yeah,
size.
but backyard gardens are typically, less than an acre.
And
And
that's pretty
and
big.
but yeah, you can do a lot, and a lot of people families have land in the outside the villages, and a lot of people are planting on land that might not be theirs, but they have permission to use it because there's a lot of land compared to the population. So we have a lot of civil society, small organizations within the villages, village councils, farmers groups. We have Red Cross groups. So we organized to bring materials in to distribute, um, handing out. Everything was rationed. People. The
Mm.
one thing about this is a shot of our farmers group.
Mhm.
Um, the one thing about small communities, as everybody knows everybody.
Yeah.
So we quickly mobilize and find out who needs what, who
Yeah.
are the most vulnerable, who's got the skills to help in this kind of disaster. And so we mobilized very, very quickly to to put things in place so people could find that they had some agency in their
Mm.
lives and be able to actually function.
Mm.
So that definitely is a benefit of being in a small rural
Yeah.
community.
You know that Auntie Mary's across the hillside. You got to go check on her, stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. And in our village, one of the things we talk about, what are the skills we need for collapse for these times? It's really the basic, essential skills. In our little village of 360 people, we have carpenters, electricians, stonemason, we have a vet, a doctor, a nurse, a lawyer, we
Mm.
have people who are mechanics,
Yeah.
so plumbers, people are quite skilled in the essential skills.
And in that sense, now I'm realizing you're almost in a mini collapse scenario when you don't have the grid and you don't have the infrastructure, you have rations and so forth. So all of these people are coming together with their different skills under real circumstances of hardship and saying, we all have to put something in here or this isn't
Mhm.
going to work out.
Well, that's exactly it. And I always look at this experience as a trial run for collapse.
That's
And
what I heard.
it's a kind of a trial run, and this is like, imagine if this was global. I mean, we were fortunate because we had all kinds of input and people sending things and
Yeah, you would have
government
had aid, sure. Yeah.
things and aid. But one day that won't be the case.
Right
We've got
on.
so many institutional breakdowns and governments can't
Yeah.
handle what's in their own country.
Yeah.
One of the reason I bring up this mural painting, one of the essential skills that I didn't realize really was incredibly helpful was art and creativity after
Great.
disaster, and how after Maria there was an explosion of art and creativity in our
Wow.
country. And people actually formed. There was the Waitukubuli Artists Association was formed after Maria, and art is it's in many cases it really helps psychologically to
Yeah.
be able to express your feelings externally.
Mm,
The trauma that you can't put into words, there's art, there's theater, there's
mm.
poetry, there's painting.
Wonderful.
And it's also wonderful for social bonding.
Mm.
uh,
Yeah,
so
so that's a group project, that mural by the looks.
yeah. And so WA was really well supported, and there was just so much energy around it, people telling their stories about what they experienced. And it also helps you to reimagine what could be next. This was an exhibit in a church that lost its roof. So you see there's no roof.
Yeah.
Beautiful church, and they're beautiful artworks and installations through this church about, people's experiences of the storm and rebuilding, and what does culture mean, and, how we continue. Um, so these are some other
Mm.
images that came out.
You still
From,
so you can sense some real processing through the work as well as just the beauty and the vitality in it.
hmm absolutely. So this is an artist residence we recently hosted. So we've done a lot of work with artists in terms of giving them space to come together,
Hmm.
process and connect. I really personally love being able to, to host and have a refuge for art and the creative arts. We recently hosted a circus festival. So what you're seeing here is young
Yeah.
people performing. They're part of the Waitu circus troupe, and it's it. I was thinking, well, what really can build resilience? You need programs, you need specific things to deal with eco anxiety and depression and
Mm,
that kind of
mm.
thing. And then I really, in working with the artists, I realized you don't actually have to do that. You need to create the space, the container for people to come together to connect in real ways,
Mm.
and then have this kind of
Right.
safe place to express yourself and to work on projects and to collaborate. It doesn't really matter what it is,
Right.
as
Yeah.
long as it's creative and it's bringing people together in a natural setting, and people being able to feel that they can, create something collectively and
Mm.
reimagine the future for
Yeah.
themselves.
Okay. So make the space, get the people together, and it will come, whatever it is, whatever creativity
Yeah.
will just arise out of that, out of people's
Mhm.
hearts and souls.
Yeah. This was an art therapy workshop we did with a visiting therapist. Um, and there's a huge amount of trauma, of course, still from the hurricane. And every year when people, hear heavy rain and hurricane season or winds picking up, there's a visceral response. So it's something
Yeah.
it's a continual that we need to keep working on and drawing out and finding ways to change our relationship with that trauma, and to try to feel a sense of safety,
Yeah, I did
safe.
want to ask you about that because, when here in Australia, obviously we do have our own, the fires and the floods at the moment. There's a terrible algal bloom off the coast in South Australia, killing countless marine wildlife, which is really distressing. But, when we see media, especially from the States, which is a big content provider, if I may, with like global media, often you'll see things like, oh, here comes climate change, and it'll be one of those gigantic tropical storms coming into the Caribbean, with an eye of a storm and this gigantic. Those seeing that kind of image must be a bit triggering for you when you've actually survived through one to this level of devastation.
Yeah. Well, it's the reason we don't travel in the summer because we feel we need to be here to, in case something like that
You
happens,
got
we
to
want
hunker
to be able
down
to
almost.
hunker down and protect the animals and the buildings and the neighbors. So it's definitely our time to stay put.
And this
We didn't think like that.
and
Yeah.
summer is storm season. That's why you say that.
And yes, yeah, from June until actually beginning of November is actually the window for hurricanes, but the most of them happen like right now, August and
Mm.
September.
How is it at the moment this year?
And well, this year we have Hurricane Aaron, who's actually off the coast of the US, Cape Hatteras, which was north of us, very powerful storm. It reached category 4 or 5, and now it's down to
Mm.
3.
Mm.
So we were, but it's constantly, there's no more waves coming off the coast of Africa. And now they just come off one after the other, and we just watch them. We just have to
Right.
track them
Yeah.
and just hope, you know.
Yeah.
So this was actually a deep adaptation gathering. So DA, and that's again the other piece of how we came together, because
Mm.
our Leading Through Collapse was led by the founders of deep adaptation. That to me, it's really a way of framing how we prepare ourselves, how we respond to what we're living through.
Mm.
And so I take a lot of those practices from the Deep Adaptation Forum and apply them with groups and in my community uh, and that kind of thing. So
Mm.
that yeah, I have yeah, just they're tools for building
Yeah.
resilience and building a response.
Yeah. Great.
Mhm.
Yeah, I just recently helped to co-facilitate the work that reconnects little workshop on that around here. Where I am is the Eurobodalla Shire, and a bit of we have a group in Australia called Psychology for a Safe Climate that run a climate cafe where people could come and talk. But the thing I was just so impressed by with your presentation when you made it to our little group was that this was real time. Yeah, this was the stuff we're talking about. This is the stuff we're trying to get ready for. You had a really fully mobilized program with the years afterwards to also, as you say, to learn to keep processing. And now at the edge, getting to a pointier edge all the time of, if this continues to get worse, as it surely will, how do we put these into practice now? That's what I really got from what you've done there.
Hmm. Yeah. I wanted to talk a little bit about the cultural aspects of
Mhm.
why we're able to respond this way. I'll stop sharing, but these
Right.
are just some images of Dominica, and outside of hurricane season, it's beautiful. And so
It's
that's
paradise, obviously. Yeah.
paradise. Yeah. Um, but yeah, a real there's a term called coup de main, which is a Creole word, and that's the language that's spoken here. It's a combination of French language with an African grammatical structure.
Hmm.
So coup de main is a tradition which means lend a hand, and that's something that has been part of our culture for hundreds of years
Uh-huh.
because it's in places where there's not a lot of money, people have to rely on each other. And so, in an ex slave society, in a maroon society, the maroons are the people who escaped slavery. And in the indigenous communities, we are generally, this is part of how we are. We help our neighbors. There's usually days when people all go to one person's house if there's a project to work on. So, it's all these kinds of informal relationships of support and
Mm.
community care. And that really was something that automatically springs into action when there's a disaster,
Mm.
especially after a disaster, when people really feel they need each other.
That is a massive advantage, if I may. Like if you look at the global West, it's hyper individualized, right? Like not to put too fine a point on it, we're out for ourselves. It's a competitive financial environment. What an advantage to have where you've deeply built into your culture the idea that we help each other. I think that in general, humans have that. We evolved in communities to help each other, but you actually have it as a living culture. So that must have informed the way that you put your deep adaptation practices into play
Hmm.
really helpfully.
Absolutely. There's this quote from Meg Wheatley, who I really admire her work. She talks about, it is a truism that, during the COVID pandemic, people said, we're all in this together, and she says, yeah, sure, we're all in the same storm together.
Mm.
Um, but we're in very different boats.
Yes, I
Some of
remember
us
that. It's a great
some of
quote.
us are in mega yachts, some of us are in sailboats, some of us are in kayaks, some are in dugout canoes, and some are not even in a boat. We're in the
Yeah, they're
water and we
grabbing
don't
for
know how to swim.
flotsam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's this idea that we're in this storm, which is collapse, which
Mm.
is civilizational disintegration or
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it. And we're in very different situations. So there's this disconnect between people where you have massive inequality, and you see that in places like the US and in Europe. And so it's yeah, so you don't have that automatic spirit of needing each other
Mm.
in the same.
Yeah, like I'm lucky I'm living in a regional area. Country people are generally better at that than city people, I think, just as a generalization. I know people around, I've been here for 10 years, having left Melbourne, a large capital city. So I kind of have a fair feel, I think, for the difference. And I really noticed it moving here that people say hello to you in the street, for a start. And then you get to know them and it's like, oh yeah, Meg grows garlic and Phil,
Mm.
does this and that. And so there's a little bit of that. And of course, what I want to do is to support the idea of the stuff you're talking about being a thing we can begin to prepare for. How do we help each other? That's for me, that's the big question. Yeah.
Mhm.
To so the culture that's come into it, it's partly rooted in your island traditions, which are great. You've got your deep adaptation forum. Um, People were growing again pretty quickly, sounds like. What else did you see that you felt became a part of the ingredients of what worked? Art was really exciting to see.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, those were really the main things.
Mhm.
Knowing your neighbors, knowing who you can count on. I think that Dominique is in a very unique situation because we have our own water. We have a lot of water. That's not an issue for us.
Right.
A lot of land, very fertile land. So it's very different than in a city. If the supply chains are interrupted, if the shelves go empty, if the water's your central water system is off, there's not a lot of easy alternatives.
Mm,
So that's not all places are equal in terms of being able to be self-sufficient
yeah.
and build resilience.
Okay.
But I think because I always think of complex industrial societies as you have a long way to fall um, when you think about things breaking down, as opposed to more simple agrarian societies.
Right
It's not
on.
that far to fall,
Yeah.
when we can live without electricity. Actually, we
Well, you proved that.
don't need air conditioning, and in most places, in the healthier places. But
Mm,
in the cities, you rely on those central systems to survive. So when you don't have them, it's very hard to find replacements or to make your own replacement. Um, so yeah, so I would be more concerned for people in big urban areas than in the countryside. However, there's a quote that I think is really important, and I think that it is. I don't know who said it, but there are no safe places, only safe people.
huh.
So even if you're not in an ideal place, because everywhere is going to get hit by something,
Yeah.
um, it's really the people that are the most important. That you can
Mm,
problem solve with, and trust, and and support one another to make good decisions.
mm, mm,
That's even more important than the environment itself.
hmm. Yeah. Yeah, similarly, looking into the kinds of conversations I've been tracking over these years we've been working in this space, you'll see it come up in the forums. Where's a good place to get to? Where can we go? What's going to have the best? And I've been, having watched it for a while, one of the responses to this I saw coming through that made a lot of sense was um, not so much there's no pla there are places that will be better. People are always talking about, the Highlands here and New Zealand and, Tasmania and things like that. But if you're thinking that way, you actually really need to get there now and get to know a place because you can't just rock up
Hmm.
once collapse is on and be like, "Hi, I'm the rich person from America or from Sydney, Can I join your club and everything's going to be okay down here?" You got
I
to get to know
agree.
the community. And some of the communities too are tough. Like around here, it's a primary industry area. There's a lot of deforestation still. So that's a tension, the people like myself, the greenies and so forth. Like we really need to stop doing this. But it's actually a part of the local community. So there are people, your neighbors, rely on that industry. You need to figure all this stuff out, like who, as you said, who you can talk to, who's safe, but also who's not. For some reason, they have something to protect. They might not want to help you to integrate. They might not be that friendly. Like community in the end is a massive key, right, to everything about this. Who are our people and where are they? I'm hearing is as big a question as where am I and how's that place going to go?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a key point. And you're saying, you see, oh, there's a place I want to go. I'll be safe there. But the community is what makes it safe, and because you're going to have some sort of disaster or interruption in food
Yep.
supply or, you know, heat event or something. And you need to have people that you can count on. And you can't have a community without service, too. That's the other piece. You need to be
Mhm.
prepared to have a life of service, that much of your time and energy goes towards what can I do to serve my community? What skills am I bringing, that are that's going to enhance the life experience here? What gaps need to be filled? And so that's a key to find out, what do you have that's a value to a community?
Right. Nice. So turn that question around. What do you bring? What do you give? As opposed to what do you get out of this safe place or this nice community? And then, for me, having eco psychology and animism and this real sense of connection to the more than human world, there's also, just getting beyond the whole anthropocentric, slightly selfish idea of even where can I survive? What's going to be the best place to be? What's going to be the best community? And thinking, what about all the animals that died in our fires? What about the deforestation? How do I actually also serve place? How do I be a better ecological citizen? That's important to me too.
Mhm.
How
Yeah,
do
it,
how
it
do you go with that? You have people that have lived there a long time. Sorry, you were about to say something, but I was thinking about connection to place. Do you have a strong feel amongst the people of the sacredness, let's say, of the forest?
I, it's interesting because there's there's different levels of connection. The farmers have a connection to their land,
Hmm.
but in very practical connection,
Hmm. Hmm.
because it feeds people. It's not The forest isn't for recreation as it is, in the West, where in terms of tourism, it's now becoming that just recently because people um, are getting more westernized in their approach to the
Hmm.
island because but people have taken it for granted that the forest is where you go and forage and you might go hunting and that kind of thing, and the ocean's where you go fishing. But the diving and the free diving and the snorkeling and the boating and these kinds of things are very Western centric notions that are quite
Hmm.
recent, that came with tourism, which
Hmm.
is recent. But people are appreciating it more because of the degradation we see in other places.
Right.
You know, Other islands don't have fresh water and they don't have forests and their reefs are dying, because of the pollution and the runoff. So Dominicans are understanding this more, especially the older generation. The
Hmm.
younger generation grown up, I think, with this, with the internet and with the more global outlook. The older generations are just, now more the awareness is a bit slower to come.
Hmm.
Um, but I was going to talk a bit about when we talked about, well, what do we what is really needed, and I I think about the term sanctuary a lot. And I remember um, in one of our meetings, we were looking at Gail Bradbrook's recent talk of hers, where she talked about life houses and how we need
Yeah.
to start creating sanctuaries, you know, for this time.
Mm.
And when you mentioned the more than human world, I thought a lot about the fact that we need to um, try to save what's left. You
Yeah.
know, like this is part of the deep adaptation ethos is
Mm.
we embody loving responses and we work to save what we can of
Mm.
society and
Mm.
the and nature.
Yeah,
And
like
so
Joanna Macy called holding actions. Just
it,
we got to save some of this stuff. It's an act of love as well.
it's an act of love, absolutely. So it's the kind of the stewardship. What does it mean to steward a place? And if you're blessed with a patch of land somewhere, how can you enhance it? You know, how can you make it a sanctuary for butterflies and
Mhm.
bumblebees and the
Mhm.
birds? How can we be better stewards in wherever we are?
Mm.
And I think that gives me a lot of energy and joy, to think about that as where I am, to create sanctuaries for people and for animals and
Yeah.
for insects.
Yeah, that's
Um,
beautiful. And I mean that that fits with the loving response. And it's also it's about action, right? It's what we know about mental health outcomes is people, even just a community garden in a suburb, people working together, getting their hands a bit dirty, a bit of weeding, a bit of planting, like you said, see the butterflies and the bees and the birds come back. It makes people happy. I mean, we are coded. We're like DNA wired for this stuff. So bringing that back into what you do sounds like it's been a big part of it. That's really lovely to hear. Thank you, Jessica.
mhm. Yeah, and I think that another quote that I was thinking about the other day was our friend Lauren Van Ham, who's part of our
Mm.
cohort we meet with. She was talking about resilience as being it's not so much about where you start from, but it's about more about who you become. That resilience is an action, is a process. It's not just a sort of a static thing.
Okay, yeah.
So as we move into this time of endings and collapsing institutions and things, to think about um, resilience as a practice. It's
Hmm.
not just it's something that we have to be super intentional about, and our actions have to sort of line up with um, what we want to become. We want to
Mm.
become more liberated, we want to become more self-sufficient, we want to become more open and loving and accepting. And so what are the practices that are going to help us to evolve into those people, that
Mm.
we need in these times?
Yeah. Well, we've really come around to a great place here. I don't know how much longer you have. I have time, but so I want to respect your time limits at that end, but that is a new opening, I think. That's a theme that's a really wonderful place to come to, no matter what else. You worked your way through a huge storm, 10 months of no grid and so forth. So community coming together, all the strands of that, the art, the islander traditions of who can I help here, what can I do, the gardening, the resources, but coming around also. So maybe can we do this? Can we apply this now to the situation we're at for whoever is watching or listening to this? Whether you're in an urban, in Western environment or in a regional place, how who do we become? I think it's a really important question because people are going to be looking for answers. They're going to be looking for guidance. This is the whole point of us joining that leadership group right back in the day was how are we going to respond? Or for me, and I think for you, for Lauren, for the rest of our group, how are we going to respond in a loving way? I don't want to become a snarling beast fighting over the scraps. I don't want to see that in my community. How are we going to be good to ourselves and to others through this? It's going to be tough. So let's get down to it. So we start with resilience as a practice. That's great. What can I give? Who can I become? I don't know. For me, that's really ringing true here. Who am I in this? Who am I going to be in this? What kind of a human am I going to be as things get tougher, which is a pretty convincing scenario right now.
Yes, yeah. And I think having that feedback from your community is super important. You know, they reflect who you are, how you're getting treated, what energies are coming back to you. Um, really asking you to, yeah, to find out where's my place in all of this and what kind of relationships do I want?
And how might we begin to put that into practice when we're not in a post-storm scenario? You know, when you're in that real scenario, it's like, okay, go. And it was the same here with the fires and with the floods. I asked my friends in the that got flooded out in the really big floods a couple of years ago in Northern Rivers, we call it here on the east coast of Australia, what it was like. And they were like, man, there is so much love. Like everyone's reaching out, everyone's checking on each other. By the time the actual government helpers turn up days later, we're good. Like, you know, everyone's moved the couches out and sitting around chatting again. It's great. And of course, that changes then over time. We all slip back into, well, the infrastructure's sorted, back to business as usual, so on and so forth. In terms of everyday life, we're all going to start to get impacted more often, more intensively. How do we go about in everyday life checking in with community and beginning to, you know, to set up these networks and processes and so forth? Do you have any suggestions for us on that one?
Well, there's so many different community groups in Dominica because there's a women's empowerment groups, there's farmers, there's tourism association, there's all kinds of, and everybody's sort of volunteering. Again, this is part of our cultural legacy on different groups, and it's because we don't have the institutions. It's almost like necessity is the mother of invention, you
Mhm.
know? If you have institutions and a Y and a gym and all these wonderful camps for your kids and all of pickleball down the road, like then you don't really need to make much effort to
Uh,
create social organizations or to find ways to support each other. Or you never have to be bored. It's always
yeah,
kind of entertaining yourself
yeah,
and your kids. But none of that is there, then you have to figure out, okay, what are we going to do with the summer for the kids of the summer?
yeah,
Um, how am I going to you know, get a sports team going because there's absolutely no support for that. But it's really healthy and it's important. So
yeah.
it's a different mindset when
Mm,
you there's a lack of
mm, mm,
institutional support, right, and corporate support
mm.
for those kinds of community things. And I don't know how you put people in a situation of a lack without the thing crumbling. I mean, it's
Yeah,
like you know
yeah, we can
um
we can go out and do a rewilding camp or a vision quest or something. We can force ourselves to have nothing for a while, but that's not going to work scaled up. And and we're part of an international cohort, right? We're talking about this all over the world. This isn't just about Dominica and Australia. There's people from the States and so on. And so it's a global challenge. There's a lot of different scenarios, but what I'm hearing a little bit of is like, okay, we can't just automatically create this situation where the community is going to come together under duress, until there's lack, as you say. But what I am hearing is, art becomes important, giving service, growing food, which is really big around here where I live. A lot of people are farmers or intensive home gardeners. Um, what we can do is set up ways that the community can get in touch with each other. We can set up some networking events and some stuff that's not onerous, that might even be a bit of fun, and find out who's around and what we can do, and just get back to knowing who's around the corner.
well, that's a really good point. And I would add to that, if you do like little projects that aren't like, yeah, aren't really big asks for people. It might be Earth Day. Do something for Earth Day that's educational and
Mm,
fun. with a group of people you've never worked with before, never met, and put something on, whether it's screening a film and having a conversation,
Mm.
about it, or doing an art installation with a group, of kids in the neighborhood to talk about, yeah, the situation with plastics or something.
Yeah.
Um, you could do those little projects and then you sort of get to know, okay, who are the people that are actually do what they say they're going to do, and who are the people that aren't, and who's creative, and then you can get to know people, because I think that's the first step, right? Is really getting to know who your
Yeah,
people are.
great. Yeah. And the other thing you've said in there, Jessica, that's really jumped out at me is, as a person who has been an environmental activist my whole adult life, really, and when you hit the collapse data, it's very, very easy to give up. And I've hit points where I've said, look, there's nothing I can do about plastic. And I know that's true. I know that whatever decision I make over a piece of plastic or not means absolutely nothing in front of the weight of what's pouring into the oceans every day. But the difference is the care factor, and this is what brought me back, I guess, what came around for me, my form of eco spirituality, or whatever it is just saying, yeah, but it's an act of love for me to try to do what I can. And so I want to connect with those people. I don't believe anymore that we're going to stave off collapse. I don't believe anymore that if I save a piece of plastic, it's going to make any difference. But I still feel like I want to do what's more beautiful and compassionate. And maybe I can find those people by, as you say, having an Earth Day event, and they'll rock up and we'll be able to say, yeah, it's terrible, isn't it? We're probably losing this, aren't we? But at least we're in it together, right? We can find each other through that.
Mhm. Yeah, you find the joy and the connection, and it just makes life better, for
Yeah,
everybody,
yeah,
and psychologically, because I think the mental health issue is a big one. We haven't talked a
yeah.
lot about that, but I think if we can do things that are good for our mental health and our physical health, then yeah, it'll be easier on the way on those downslopes. It will
Mm,
definitely handling them better. We'll be able to help emotionally regulate one another if we're
mm,
feeling well, resourced emotionally, psychologically.
mm.
But I think it's absolutely worth doing.
That's
Um,
that's another nice place to come around to. We have a really famous forest defender in Australia called John Seed. He worked closely with Joanna Macy, who we've mentioned very briefly. And he told me once that, every now and then he, of course, gets downhearted and says, well, what am I doing here? For every part of every forest we save, there's 100 times that gone in the same amount of time. And someone said to him, John, if your entire life's work saves one patch of one forest for one extra day, it's worth it. Like, stop thinking you're going to save the world and just, be okay with your small gains. And I kind of felt a little bit about that in what you said. If that point in time when the flood's ripping through here and I choose to reach my hand out and save a child at risk to myself, or choose not to eat for a day so a grandma around the corner can have those morsels. That'll be the difference between me, actually activating love for life without necessarily needing anything back from my actions. And yeah, just and not. The difference will just be reaching our hands out and helping out in
yeah,
an everyday situation.
I agree. Absolutely.
Hmm.
That reminds me what Gail said in that piece she wrote was, if anything, we're just trying to lessen the depravity on the way down,
Nice.
lessen suffering, reaching out, and we might in that plant the seed, for the next generation.
Hmm.
There might be something we do that seeds the transformation, you
Yeah.
know,
Well,
whatever that is on the other side of collapse. There are going to be people and communities and whatever on the other side, um, at least initially. So,
hmm.
yeah, thinking that's definitely worth doing and thinking about.
Yeah. I'm not sure at all about the long-term future, but I appreciate too, I have kids we shared offline. Um, I have teens and you have a daughter in her early 20s, and we do need to think about how what we're giving them, and if we can't give them material goods, we can give them spirit, we can give them community, we can give them a kind of hope. I've always struggled with that word, even Joanna Macy's active hope. I've been like, yeah, but the future looks so bleak. I can't do hope. I can only do what we're doing now. But actually hope is just doing what we're doing now with love. That's hope. That's sharing possibility, even just in an everyday sense.
Yeah,
Well,
very
Jessica,
true.
do you have anything you want to add for us? Is there anything you haven't said that you feel like has come up for you, or that you'd like to let people know from your work and from your experiences with deep adaptation and with Dominica?
Yeah, there's one thing that I like to recall because it was so sort of poignant. Now there's so many disasters every week, nobody even really pays attention to much. But when Hurricane Maria hit us and devastated our island and then devastated Puerto Rico, we were on the front page of just about every single newspaper, every major newspaper in the world. And people who've never heard of Dominica were hearing about Dominica.
Yeah.
And of course, the headline is Dominica destroyed, obliterated. There's nothing left. It's gone. And of course, I thought that was so funny as I was sitting there, with my partner, my child, and my community. We're not gone. There was a lot left. There were all the people, there was all the animals, there was all the vegetation, battered as it was. And we had also our strength and our resilience and our traditions to come together and struggle and to survive and to recover.
Mm,
So in all of these collapses and disasters, you're always going to get people saying, "Oh, it's done, it's over, it's finished." But I think that we underestimate the human will and spirit to survive.
nice.
In whatever situation. I mean, you just
Mm,
look around the world and genocides and all kinds of unbelievable situations. Collapse is not new for many, many people and cultures around the world. We've lived through collapses,
mm,
the indigenous communities, my African descendants, ancestors rather, lived through horrendous conditions. And I'm actually a product of a surviving lineage.
yeah.
So yeah, so we have to be super careful about what we know what's coming is absolutely, beyond probably imagining, but we also it's beyond imagining to know how or who is going to get through this
Right
and
on.
might, you know, what
Nice.
might be on the other side.
Right. Let's
Um,
hope that's another opportunity for a glimmer of hope. More than a glimmer, an active hope. Again, what I heard as you were saying that was what those headlines meant was civilizations wiped out. This big infrastructure's wiped out. Like you said, the
mhm.
people, the land, the animals, you're down there saying, hey, all right, what do we do? Not necessarily rebuild in the sense that, we're not going to be able to rebuild what this late modern civilization thing is. This infrastructure is going to collapse. Yeah, what comes next? That's
What comes next? And people like Dougal Hine talk about at work in the ruins. We're here in the ruins. Some of us are in serious
Mhm,
ruins, and
mhm.
we can build what comes next or imagine it or start. It might not last any longer, but at least there's this opportunity to be creative. It's going back to that creativity and um, giving it a go. You know.
Giving it a well, us Aussies, we like to give it a go, red hot go. But the other thing I heard you say in there that I would just like to underscore too is learning from Indigenous peoples around the world. As you said, I can't remember the particular author, but I remember reading that piece that was something like, well, we've been living through collapse for over 500 years. This is, this is what Western civilization has been like for us.
Yeah.
So, that really woke me up when I read that. I was like, okay, yep, that's a voice of truth right there. Collapse has been real, as you pointed out, and all of us have ancestors that have survived hard times. In some way or another, we're here, so we've got to tap back into some of those. For me, anyway, it's important to try to tap back in to the ancestral traditions that helped us to pull through and to be here. And what I'm hearing from you is, yeah, focus on what people can do get some service, get some creativity, create the conditions for service and creativity. I think that's what I'm going to take out of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you're doing that, I think, with your work.
A little bit. We do our best. Well, we have to, no, fair. We have to stand for what we're doing, right? So yeah, let's keep it going. Thank you so much, Jessica. We'll continue our conversations in our group over time, and let's maybe I'll say, excuse me, when I pop this up onto the YouTube channel for Nature Calling, we'll drop in a couple of these resources, Gail's talk that you shared with us, and a couple of other things, maybe a link to the work that reconnects and Active Hope and so forth. And yeah, hopefully one day we get to catch up, although I no longer really fantasize about international airfares, I must admit. Be great to think I could get to Dominica one day, but I'll probably just not not imagine it and rather just work in my local community as you do most of the time.
There's a lot in your hemisphere. That's true. That there
Indeed.
is.
Yeah, true. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a great place.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Geoff, for the invitation.
Brilliant. And it's been really good to talk, Jessica, and I'm sure that everyone would have got a lot out of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks for watching, and please consider liking this video. And if you want more content like this, subscribe, and the Nature Calling bell will toll for you. This is Geoff signing off.